Recording is on.
friendly things. So I just have a little bit. And then I'm going to rely on those of you who are presenting to send the slides or upload them into the drive later. So does that sound good? Okay, very good. Well, Bryn, you already know that we are having three different presenters. I think in the newsletter it didn't say, I'm just foregoing introductions because we all know one another by now, I think. But in the newsletter, it didn't say who was doing what, but we did talk about the different topics that we're talking about. So I think in order of how we listed it, Sage, you get to go first. Is that right? So lovely, Sage. I'll let you introduce your topic and let's get going.
Good morning, everybody. I really am selfishly using this time to practice one of my favorite presentations I'm developing right now. That does heavily rely on relationship building and recruitment strategies. So I'm super excited to share this theory that I'm developing with you all today. I call this the fish tank theory, and this is directly correlating to relationship building and recruitment for volunteer programming. What is the fish tank theory? Well, I like to think of it as a theory that in order to have a productive relationship as a leader, there's a few program essentials that are required to recruit and retain volunteer relationships. And there's so many factors that can go into that, right? And there's lots of different symbolism ways we can think about it, especially when it comes to thinking about a fish tank and what all is in there. But the three things that I want to highlight today are going to be sustainability, transparency, and customization to the fish. Just because there are so many things that are required of a volunteer program and so many different facets and elements that are needed, making sure that we are maintaining some priorities, and especially in these three realms, can often lead to potentially positive relationships. Focusing on sustainability, the relationship should be able to function with varying levels of attention and care, right? We are hardworking leaders at the end of the day who are spread somewhat thin. And the relationship with every volunteer needs to be able to be sustained with or without direct communication on a regular basis, whether that's maybe you just aren't in the office 7 days a week, so you don't get to see every single day's worth of volunteers. Or maybe we have certain hours of our office hours, but there's shifts outside of those times that people are volunteering. So needing to maintain a relationship that can still thrive in those spaces where we are not connected directly is very important. And every day is not the same, and that's okay. Being able to highlight that opportunity as a volunteer coordinator and say you get the chance for everything to be different every single time, or some normalcy in these ways, but then change in this way are also great things to highlight so that your volunteers know what they're signing up for. Some examples of more sustainable relationship practices could look like open door office hours that change quarterly depending on your needs, evaluating what time works best for you. When do I have an extra hour that I can say, volunteers, you come to me if you need something. Right now, my door is open, my time is yours, it is reserved especially for you. Obviously, that can change and fluctuate based on the time of year and our scheduling, right? Which is why there's an evaluation quarterly of that. But providing the opportunity for communication is a great way to have a sustainable relationship without having to have direct communication all the time. Another way is to have once a month trainings that allow for question and answers with management, whether that's introductions to new educational content, or we have a new building, or this is a really cool event that we're working on. Just allowing that space for volunteers to ask the questions they might have before volunteering or serving their time might allow for those questions not to come up again in the future when you're not available to ask them. And then regular information being shared in a reasonable way. Again, we all have different work expectations and abilities when it comes to regular communication, but having a consistent flow of information that is obtainable for all volunteers at any time is very, very important. The way that I do this in my program is I have a written email that goes out once a week that I also print that email and put it in my volunteer break room so that there is 2 versions of it and people have access to that at all times. That way the same information is in both places, and no matter what, they can go to those locations to find that kind of information. And that kind of will help streamline that sustainable communication that's also acceptable for 40 hours a week, because we still have to maintain some of professional balance, work-life balance. Another thing that I want to focus on and is essential in my brain for a fish tank, right, is transparency. We want to be able to look into it and being able to see what's going on in the program. So there's a level of professionalism, obviously, is expected from an organization, but also a level of transparency needed for a volunteer to give their valuable time. Whether that's, this is how you can help us, or this is how you're impacting our story. They need to hear that, and they need to know that that's true and see that kind of impact, or else they're not going to know the kind of waves they're making in their fish tank. In the volunteer space, again, email communication and information sharing is just that transparent, hey, this is what's going on. These are the changes. You probably don't care that the staff kitchen got a new refrigerator, but we're really excited about it, so we've had to tell you. Things like that can make them feel like they are being let into the world that they are trying to support and be a part of. And that will also, in return, get them more involved and invested in your program. Transparency also with honest feedback and constructive support. I also like to be very honest in my interview process. So my first interactions with volunteers, I highlight the fact that I love making friends and helping others. But I also have a weakness of having many concussions and resulting in short-term memory issues. So being transparent with my positives as a leader and my weaknesses as a leader can make sure that everyone is aware of where we are developing and growing as a program and how they can be a part of that. And then reliably following up with answers and solutions, especially in a space where they might have a lot of questions. My space is educational focused, so there's a lot of sometimes what I call big brain content that might take a lot of questions and answers, and I love that. But being able to follow up and say, oh, you asked me a question about diesel engines, so I Googled it. Here's what I found out. And following up with that, even though they might have forgotten they asked the question to begin with, but at least they were able to see you come back and remember that they asked that question and follow up with that solution or with that answer, will also provide transparent feedback for you as well. And then again, showing up as your authentic self. I am brutally honest when it comes to my interviews because it was something that's very important that people know about me. But when we are our authentic selves, it is shown in our work, it's shown in our statements, it's shown in our passion. And it will also in return expect others or set the example of others to bring their authentic selves. And when we're volunteering, we're expecting volunteers to give their free time, they are only bringing their authentic selves. That's kind of what the whole thing we're wanting them to bring is them. So rewarding that and reciprocating that energy will often lead to positive results in relationship building. Now, custom to the fish. This is a long metaphor, a long stretch, and I know that. But the basics of it all is every volunteer is different. You can make a lot of blanket statements on what you think you can do to develop your program, and they're probably all true, but they might not hit everybody. There's lots of things that we can do to create a custom program that might seem not important to us, but very important to somebody else and make them feel invested or more a part of the program themselves. So allowing decorative name tags, pronoun pins, or preferred uniform colors. I let them choose blue apron or green apron. Those are your options. But that gives them the autonomy and the choice to customize their experience and how they want to interact with people that day and how they're feeling. Allow flexible scheduling for orientation and trainings. Again, we only have 40 hours a week. We can only do so much. Evaluating quarterly does help a lot, but providing that kind of flexibility allows, especially for the volunteering space, it to feel like a voluntary situation versus a job interview or a paid position where they might not be as willing to come in their open free time versus their committed free time. And that could be a valuable difference in their service attention as well. And then creating a space for anonymous feedback as a supervisor. I have a hate me box or a comment box that I allow people to write notes that they hate me. I encourage it. I want them to let me know if there's something wrong or I need to change anything, but I want them to do anonymously and honestly in a feedback forum so that they can see the result of that feedback. I haven't had it happen yet, thankfully, but I have gotten lots of feedback of, oh, I want some more healthy snack options. Or I saw this happening and I don't really know what to do about it. I don't know who to talk to about it. And we can take action steps from there in a safe and secure forum. And that can also kind of create a more transparency again in the program and that more commitment to an investment to a volunteer program. What we want to make sure we don't do is forgo policy and procedure because we want to make sure everyone has a good time. That's not the goal, especially when it comes to maintaining volunteer programs. We need to make sure that we are having a strict procedure and how we are welcoming new volunteers, training them, orienting them, and saying goodbye, even if that's part of their journey. Those are all still important, and enforcing that policy and procedure can also help create a better experience for the volunteers in the long run because they're getting to experience what that is like as well. Sometimes volunteers are very young in their career experiences and don't know what it's like to have a to-do list. That's great. This is a great place to start. So kind of enforcing those same blanket procedures and policies are very important. Force decisions to be made, especially if it's a time-sensitive manner. Don't leave it so open-ended that you never hear from them ever again. I like to set timelines of, oh, if I don't hear back from you, I'm going to reach out to you by Tuesday. And that is just the honest, if you don't hear from me or if I don't hear from you, this is what's going to happen next kind of transparency. But also allows the customization for them to say, oh, I will let you know by this time, or I will be here at this time. And it creates them to make the decision for themselves and how they are going to go about the program in a little bit more of a structured way, while still allowing them the flexibility to dictate what their timeline is. And then expecting everyone to be comfortable expressing themselves right away. That is not something that is very common. Maybe you'll get it once in a while, but sometimes people are going to be a little bit confused or frustrated or unknown to the idea of customizing your apron or changing out your lanyard if you want to, bringing back the old one, meeting people where they're at, customizing the tank to the fish, realizing what their needs are and seeing what benefits they want can be a very important process and really a key element to the retention and the recruitment of your volunteers. Because we'll get into that later. Regularly evaluating processes, application handbooks, any policies, revisions, updates is another great way to make sure that the fish tank is being kept in the development stage and the growth period versus stagnant and maintaining a certain level of state and not really going any higher or achieving anything else. Growth is a very important part of the program, especially in nonprofits where that is the main level of where we get a lot of our financial benefits is from seeing growth and from seeing changes and advancements made. So I recently just did a 5-year fiscal year evaluation of all of the data points for my volunteer program I could possibly think of, whether that's volunteers with less than 6 hours, volunteers with more than 40 hours, who's came in 100% of the time they signed up for, who hasn't come in for 6 years, and kind of running those statistics and seeing what's changed. So far, I'm still evaluating, so I will get back to you on those results. But that kind of information can help dictate where to go next if you're feeling like you're starting to get a little stagnant in your program. Recruitment is key. A program's reputation is the first glimpse into the fish tank that is the program. All recruitment should be an exact reflection of what your program is and is prioritizing. So sharing the benefits that aren't monetary, because again, this is a volunteer program. So highlighting the leadership opportunities, focusing on the continuing education benefits. I will say I'll write you a recommendation if you give me more than 5 hours, sometimes just mapping out exactly what people will get from the experience might be the recruitment key that will bring more people in for your programs. And then also hiding leadership opportunities, whether that's talking to people their own age or older than them or younger than them, or what kind of structure you have for those leadership potential. I know a lot of other programs have different levels of volunteerism, highlighting that, saying you start here, but you could be here, could be a great way to get those volunteers who are especially goal driven to see it as an obtainable thing for them to work towards. And then active volunteers are your best recruitment team. Checking in on your volunteers today will get you more volunteers tomorrow, just because they will know that they're a valuable part of your program, and they'll communicate that to people in their circles, saying, I love this experience because my volunteer coordinator cares so much. Marketing is a whole different conversation. That's one we could have a whole other day. I think I've yapped my 15 minutes worth. I'm sure maybe a little bit more. But that has been my little 3-point conclusion on the fish tank that could be your volunteer program and the theory behind it. If you want to hear more, there's a lot that goes into a fish tank, and I have a lot of more information to share. This is just a small snippet of a bigger program I'm working on, and I'd love to share that and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sage. I love this theory, and I'm excited to hear more about it as you continue to flesh it out. I think it's a really good metaphor, actually. So thank you for thinking of that. Does anybody have questions that you'd like to ask of Sage, or things that she helped you think about?
That was great, Sage. I have definitely have notes going on over here, but I do have a question about volunteers that maybe you've trained and maybe you've tried to communicate to about what their maybe barriers are to engagement. Like, have you had another thing that you've done that's like, wow, this really changed the situation around my volunteers engaging now? I know sometimes we just have volunteers that are not engaged, and we try a lot of things, and it's just the way it is. But I'm curious if there's anything you or anyone's tried that you feel like, wow, this really made a difference.
One thing that has been proven extremely beneficial for a certain volunteer, and I will take like 2% credit for this. The other credit goes to his mom, who I called on the phone after his interview and said, hey, I want to provide the best experience for your son here. What tools could I provide him that will make him more successful? And she gave me very, very helpful feedback. So mom gets the points because she picked up my phone call. But he now has a little clipboard that's like this big that has a wipe off to-do list. And the to-do list that I vocalized to my volunteers, he has written out and is expected to check off and ask questions if he has some. He has a whole backside of things where he can write down his questions if I'm not available. That is proving to be a very helpful tool for keeping him focused on what tasks he has to accomplish. I think our next step in the development stage with him and his learning here will be topic flashcards of things that we are welcome to talk about with guests while we're visiting and chatting, because he gets really excited about sharing his photography business and his trips that he likes to go to, and he just does this thing and he wants to do this when he gets older, and we love that kind of passion, but we are trying to stay focused. So I will soon be testing out potentially topic flashcards of what we should be focusing on when we're chatting with people on the floor. And I'll get back to you, Bryn, on how that goes. But so far, the clipboard with the to-do list is very helpful. Mom gave me tips for that. He's even told me this is super nice. And he also provides me a lot of feedback of what tools he needs when he's volunteering here as well. So I consider myself privileged that I'm getting so much support on that end for those things. But those are some of the resources that I'm testing that hopefully will yield some good results. But sometimes just gamifying it, saying if you do this thing, you get a prize. Or I love bingo cards. I think I love bingo cards a little too much. It's like one of my favorite things because it is voluntarily, it's self-management, task focus. So your goal is to achieve a certain number of tasks in a certain way, but you get to delegate how you approach that challenge. And that has allowed for like all of my volunteers start with a bingo card, like no matter what, that's the expectation, because that's what I hope they utilize to baby step themselves into the program. So bingo card, baseline, to-do list, top is kind of what I'm fluctuating between. Great question. I have a lot, and I can't wait to find more.
That's great. I love that. I wrote down, I'm dealing with adults, so I can't call their moms, unfortunately. I wish I could. That would be nice. Your kids aren't doing anything. But I wrote down like for how that applies is like, maybe a check off to-do list. Like maybe some people really do need, you know, like a little, like real specific direction, right? And be like, I just need you to focus on this.
Wash
So
your
I like that. I
hands.
like that concept. Great.
Put on name tag, like literally, like everything. But eventually, maybe that to-do list will change. Maybe it'll update to where he has those kind of core things figured out. But that will just change a little bit. Yeah, adults bingo cards sometimes go great. Sometimes they're like, "What do you? Don't give this to me. This is a waste of my time." But I encourage you to find out what motivates them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was working in the vet industry, there was always a note that said, "This dog is food motivated." If there was a pup that was coming in that we knew their temper was going to be they're going to be a little stressed out, and so I said, "This dog, if you give them a treat, they're great." Like this is how they need to be, kind of soothed and used to cope. So, find out what dogs are food motivated. You know, kind of figure out are they looking for community tickets? Like, are they trying to find other ways to connect with people, or trying to find those, like, why are they volunteering, and what makes them want to do more? Yeah, it's a hard conversation, and again, I'm trying to find all the answers as well. But we'll work together, Bryn. We'll keep bouncing ideas back and forth.
Yeah.
That's a common challenge we both have.
No, I like that. Those are good ideas. Thanks, Sage.
I will add to that because we do not bingo cards, but we have task lists. And it's great for everybody because it means our volunteers know what to do. And the staff have less that they need to communicate as a general rule. So self-management is huge, I think, for engagement because it helps people to have ownership. So bingo cards are a different version of the same thing. So, yeah, and for us, we have them laminated. They're kept at our front desk, and that's huge for us. So, yeah, I would be happy to share. Anybody here or later, I'm sure Sage saying that you'd be happy to share how you've utilized those. I will say the other thing for us, and I think both of those go with transparency in my mind, is that we have worked very hard so that I'm not the only one who has answers to things. That I think is huge because if you, as the program manager, are the only person who has answers to big questions that volunteers always need to know, or to small questions that they don't think to ask, it really slows the engagement too, right? So then you're limited to how quickly you can respond to a common question. So equipping more teammates, whatever that looks like, to be ambassadors for your program, able to keep a volunteer moving when you are busy, answering questions as they start to get engaged and have a lot. That's probably been the biggest game changer on our staff, is to help people realize I cannot be the only one who manages volunteers in a pragmatic way. My job is to provide direction and to give broad overview, and to think about the big pickups, but I cannot be the only volunteer manager. It's really everybody's job. So that has been big for us. So yeah. Any other questions or comments? Sage, you had such good things that I had additional thoughts. I appreciate that.
I will say, Sage, I appreciate you sharing the fish tank theory. I wrote it down on my notes because I think it actually does kind of fit what we do. And then again, I feel like we're the fish store as volunteer managers, and we're passing that fish tank to someone else, and you're like, please don't break the glass. Like, we have taken care of these fish. We've done everything. Please don't kill the fish. And I feel like on occasions we work with Darlas. I don't know if you've seen Finding Nemo, but I feel like on occasions we're handing the fish in the bag to a Darla, and you're like, I can't do it. So definitely excited to learn more about that as well, because I think navigating Darlas is another position that we as volunteer managers run into, of kind of working of passing that fish tank and making sure it's taken care of outside of our hands once it does pass our hands.
Yeah, yeah. I have it. I like us thinking of the fish tank owners, but also I had the coordinators being the filter of the situation, because we are telling the tank what's important and what's nutritious and what's helpful, and also filtering the energy and the outside air of the organization potentially. I don't know. Again, developing working theory. I don't know. So far I have vegetation being the unpaid benefits, because it's a green, but it's not money, and it's still good, but it's not money. So yeah, stay tuned. If we want another fish take presentation, I could probably mock one out to be about half an hour, 45 minutes. But that will be maybe a highlight of some of the things I've already talked about, including some more information as well.
Awesome. I love that, Sage. I'm so excited you're developing this, and I think you're going to get a lot of use out of this presentation, not just with us. So very good. Okay, well, Nate, I believe you are up next. If you want to take over.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Hopefully the screen can be seen. I am touching base today on navigating difficult volunteer transitions. I think this is something that a lot of us face on a regular basis, as well as I think it's a group opportunity that the volunteers are also facing. There we go. We're going to touch on that today. So first off, I wanted to first say change is inevitable. It's part of daily life. We transition into great wonderfulness, as well as there's going to be times that are kind of more difficult. So we're going to be touching based off of what are those difficult items that we might be facing, and how can we transition those into positive and have more beneficial outlook, more of a available outlook of accepting and embracing change. And I will say transitions I have found actually been so beneficial to my volunteer management style, as well as supporting and helping others. Being able to kind of work with those transitions, kind of take on a whim what's happening, or if there is a situation that's happening, being able to work through that has been very important. And so first and foremost, I want to say, you as a volunteer manager have to be okay with that transition. You have to be okay learning and accepting that. And every situation is going to be a little bit different. I have some leaves here to express, like every leaf is different. Every leaf is unique. And so each transition is unique, but being accepting of that transition and change is going to benefit you as a volunteer manager, which I think is really awesome. When it comes to supporting, also being able to support not only the individual in that change, but also supporting the community that that individual represents or is a part of. So we're going to be touching on that here on the next slide. So this slide, I purposely made it really complex and crazy with things all over the place. And the reason for that is what transition feels like. It feels very overwhelming. It feels like, where do I look? What do I do? What's that next step? And to be honest with you, with all the different changes and transitions that I've worked through and faced, again, you start somewhere. So I'm going to start with first burnout. Most of us have worked through or faced a volunteer facing burnout, and that transition is a hard conversation. Most organizations, when I've worked with them on their volunteer program, the first thing I do is say, identify the volunteers that have been here the longest and talk to them, have a conversation, because those volunteers are also working through transitions and changes. And so those are the ones that I say will have a flight risk. Those are the ones that have been through the ringer. And so being able to identify and then talk to them, find out where they're at. If you can help navigate transition or change that's going to be happening and are able to have that on your radar, that's going to help and support you with transitions a lot easier, because then you're going to be able to communicate and also sometimes eliminate a change or a transition that might be happening. For those of you who don't know what burnout is, that is where someone is literally in the middle of everything and they are tapped out. They don't have the time, energy, capacity to work through the process. And a lot of times they go silently frustrated. So having those conversations and starting those conversations with them is so ideal, and it's so key. One of the things that I've talked about as well is, just as much as recruitment is so valuable and important, helping with these transitions are just as much important. You want to come at them with the same compassion, the same care. You want to ensure that they know that, hey, I'm here for you and I'm going to support you no matter what your decision is, but I'm here to support you. You are what is most important. With burnout, I wanted to share a quick story. We had a volunteer that had been with the organization for over 15 years. And again, with the transition, they were able to see, I love some of the comments that have been shared of like seeing that transition of like only one person knowing the information to having 50 people know the information, dropping back to one person. I could tell immediately because I went to them to get their feedback, and I could say they were done. They didn't want to be with the organization anymore. They were tapped out. And the very first thing after they spilled all that information, I said, do you want to be here anymore? Like, what does this look like? Again, bringing up that transparency of, hey, if this isn't a good fit for what you're wanting, or it isn't what it used to be because of all the changes, that's okay. Like, I'm different. I'm new. I'm trying to learn from you, and I appreciate this feedback. But if you're done, if you're burnt out and tapped out, I don't want to keep having that happen to you. Sometimes it's focusing on that individual to say, hey, I care more about you than all of this together, because you are an individual and I care about who you are as an individual. Now, that individual, they're like, yes, I need a break. No one has offered me a break. I felt overwhelmed. I felt overly committed. And I think each of us have probably been in that circumstance ourselves. And so being able to say, hey, take a break, and it's okay. Whenever you want to come back, you're welcome to come back. That individual took 6 months. And I will never forget the phone call, because I was like, here's all my contact information. I'm not going anywhere. Communicate with me if you need anything. 6 months later, they called me back and they're like, hey, me being burnt out and you saying that you gave me that space and that time to be me and find out what I was committed to and what I wanted, that is why I'm recommitting myself to you and the organization. They knew that it wasn't just I needed them to do this job because we don't have the staff to do the job. It was such a focus on, I care about you. And the work that you're doing is so impactful, but I care about you. Rolling into misalignment and expectations of values, this is something that I feel like I come across on a consistent basis. If you don't have set expectations or expectations that volunteers understand, they're not going to be able to follow those. So many times we have volunteers that they're doing something that you might think is wrong or that other people are saying is wrong. And I can't tell you how many times I go to the staff and I'm like, what were the expectations? Well, I just told them to do it. Okay, well, you can't be upset if they're doing something that you didn't teach them or train them how to do. So it's so important and key to make sure that those expectations are set beforehand, and then you're able to help navigate that for the volunteer, as well as help navigate what their need is. One of the examples of this that I would like to share is we had a volunteer who wanted to do community service with us. It was court-ordered community service. We let them come in, get their hours done, and they're like, well, I'd like to continue. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what would you like to do? Like, your doors are open. And he's like, wait, I can do other things? I'm like, yeah, we court-ordered. We have to have signed off hours, so we have limitations to that. But now this is open. Like, this is an open opportunity. You can pick what you want to do because we don't have to sign off on your hours for court. We don't have to send those hours in. That volunteer has been with us now for over 2 years, and he came to us required to do his hours. And because of that conversation and that transition of helping him realize that there is additional freedom with him being a volunteer and sticking it out and working with us, that opened doors to where he found a niche that fit him perfectly. And he's actually, we love him to death. People go and give him hugs like every time they see him. And those are those items that you want to build. You want to build that compassion and care where a volunteer knows I'm not going to be judged for who I am or what I did. Building those transitional periods where that volunteer knows, hey, again, I care about you. Health concerns and life changes are one of the things that I have navigated the transitions of volunteers way too many times, and I actually hate it. This is one of the hardest transition points for me personally, mostly because health concerns come up. Things happen. I actually had a volunteer that I was training to be like my right hand volunteer. I called him Coach, and we trained together on a regular basis for a good solid 3 months. And I'm like, yes, like I have this amazing volunteer. And unfortunately, he ended up having a really bad medical health scare that ended up happening, and he's still working through, and it pulled him away. And I was so frustrated. And I think being able to sit down and say, hey, I'm frustrated about this. This sucks. Like I did everything. But again, I care about him as an individual, and I care that he was willing to come to us and support us. He's just as frustrated. And being able to sit down and have that conversation of, this entire situation sucks. I'm frustrated at these pieces, but I care about you, and I want you to know that you taking a step away is okay. Being able to be transparent and have that communication, and this will lead into the following last item of a challenge, but being able to have that conversation with this person that we had developed, that friendship and relationship was so key into helping him realize that, again, it was okay that he stepped away. I still call him to this day and reassure him like, hey, I found some new people. Don't worry, a spot's always for you. You're always welcome back. But I found some other people that are helping me out, so you don't worry about me. I want you to worry about you. One of the other stories that I'd like to also share is we had a volunteer that she was hands down years of experience. And she came to me one day, and again, having an open door, I will 100%, again, having that open communication is key with volunteers. She came to me one day and she's like, hey, I messed up. Having a volunteer come to you and say, hey, I messed up, especially when they have access to a lot of things, is really difficult because you're like, okay, what do we need to do? And she said, hey, I noticed that I've been missing a few items that you have let me know, and that we had everything laid out. I've been missing them. And it's because my memory's going. And I am so, so sorry. And I was like, hold up. It's like this little tiny small thing. I was like, that doesn't mean we can't have you volunteer. Like, let's transition into, again, changing those expectations, having that conversation where you're still able to do something that you feel so passionate about, where those small little things don't matter. But it was the fact that, again, she felt comfortable having that conversation with a small little mistake. Again, it could be a big health concern, even down to a small one, but it's being able to build those relationships where having conversations is hard. Now, same lady, she ended up actually going on life support like a year later. It was devastating to me. And I remember after she actually ended up getting off life support, her and I had a conversation. She's like, I'm so sorry. I'm going to be coming back to work, and I'll just like try to do minimum. I'm like, sweetheart, no. Like, we're at the point where we're going to take a pause because I need you to care about you and your health. And I think with navigating transitions, and I don't know if you've noticed from the last 3, it's about caring for that individual. It's about caring for them. As much as it's important to have volunteers help and support an organization, it's not worth the individual and or the community that that individual represents to lose that. So the last item was communication. This is a key item because transitions and company changes happen. My best solution to support this change and challenge is to communicate immediately. Communicate the information you have. The sooner you have that information and the better you can communicate it, especially if it's a change that's going to affect your volunteers, the better. If they're able to pivot, that a lot of times they have ideas, they have plans, they have things that are going to benefit, the better you're able to communicate that, the sooner. And then have a conversation. If someone wants to have a conversation, open that door and opportunity of, hey, here's a transition that's going to be coming. It's going to affect you. What can we do to work through that together? As we do all these things, being able to have healthy transitions and help people realize that change is healthy, that it's okay. We are having that opportunity to grow, not only ourselves, but also help that volunteer grow. When it comes to volunteers who are experiencing these transitions, we want to ensure that they know that that change is okay and that that change is not a problem. Being able to help them recognize that, hey, the work that you're doing matters. What you are doing is important to us. Help them realize and show appreciation. Hey, I couldn't have been able to do XYZ these last 3 months without you being my coach, without you helping me work through these items that I've been processing in my brain, but I haven't been able to get on paper. Find those highlights to the silver lining. Be able to look and say, hey, these are the positives that I'm going to pull from this, and these are the things I'm going to highlight. And let me tell you, sometimes you have to highlight things. Again, when you have a volunteer in life support and the family calls you because they want you to make the decision, that's a lot. And a volunteer manager, the reason I got called on that is because of those relationships and because of building those partnerships. Again, being able to say, hey, this might not be the best situation, but we're going to make sure it becomes the best situation. We're going to transition into what can we take from this and grow from this. And again, express that positivity. And then allow openness, allow people to come back to you if they have feedback. Allow, hey, if there's a problem and there's a volunteer that you had to say, hey, we can't have you volunteer anymore, or hey, you broke a rule and these are the new expectations, or hey, you broke our expectations. This is what we communicated to you. You agreed, we agreed. Those are those hard conversations, but allowing them, hey, if at any point you have questions or have additional items that you think we could have done better on, request that information. So a few of the things that I wanted to touch base on, when it comes to communities in specifically, a lot of people are like, well, how can transitions affect a community? The example I will give is I had a volunteer pass away. It was a sudden experience where they had passed away. Again, devastating for us, for their family. Again, a highly impactful volunteer that was throughout everything. Because of how we handled the entire situation with the family members, the friends, that volunteer not only had been volunteering for us, which we knew he was volunteering for us, but he also volunteered for multiple other organizations. And not only did they wrap their arms around us as an organization because of that care that we showed that individual, but also we had family members come and start volunteering and again, continue that legacy of volunteering. Community matters. And the more you can focus on the relationships, the more you can build those relationships with the community, the less need of actually finding and having volunteers you'll have. Volunteers are there to help and support, and they're going to be there to help and support as you're building those relationships. So if you focus on the individual, focused on the community, most of those volunteer opportunities and the items that you need done will be happening. They will be filled. Again, everyone has family members who usually want to jump in. They have groups and other organizations. They have ideas. So when you're helping with transitions, also building that community basis in those relationships, have that be your focus and you'll be able to go a lot farther. Last item is going back all the way to the beginning of when you look at recruitment, it starts there. If you are compassionate, caring, supportive when you start recruiting volunteers, that's where it starts with the transitions. Because then when transitions happen, they're going to build that trust. They're going to build those relationships. And then it's not even going to be a worry. again, challenges are going to come up that blindside you. Again, having a call from a family member that your volunteers on life support and they want you to come make decisions. I did not expect that. I will never forget going home and crying because I'm like, this is not on my job. Like, this is not listed. But knowing that it was because of that relationship and partnership that we had already built. And that started at the recruitment effort. That started the day they walked in the door and that first conversation, because it was building that trust and relationship the entire time. Anyways, navigating difficult challenges, hopefully touch base for all of you. Any questions, any comments?
Nate, that was an incredible set of slides and some information and good stories that help us, I think, to consider our own volunteers and think of instances we've been part of. I'm curious if you or if anybody here has some experience with specifically dementia. We are seeing, with a lot of our consistent volunteers are older, and we have a couple of instances where relationship is there, but their memory is different and their particular personality is shifting a little bit. And I mean, we've dealt with it, and had conversations with them, in some instances, family members, in these instances in times past. But I'm curious if any of you guys have additional tips or things that you feel like have served you well with that population who's navigating a really challenging time.
I will share two instances. So the one gal, she was going through dementia. The challenge that we ran into was, number one, I wanted to find an opportunity for her. She wanted to be of value to the community. And so that was navigating that transition of what are her new expectations. And I made it seem like it was a transition to a leadership opportunity. I was like, we're going to sit down and have an hour conversation once a month. Like, so it was transitioning into more of the role she was actually helping with wasn't beneficial for us anymore, but transitioning into hey, you've dedicated so much time and energy to us that we're willing to dedicate some time and energy back. So finding an opportunity that works for where they're at in that process. The second item I would say, because again, we've had additional volunteers go through similar items. The second item I would share is sometimes it is having that conversation of, hey, it seems like there's a lot going on and we really would love to have your help. However, it's not a good fit. And it sucks because, again, if that understanding isn't there, sometimes it's having the conversation with their family members of, hey, these are the situations that are coming up. And even, again, strategically planning with them. Hey, what can we do to support them in this transition process or support you as a family through this transition process? But sometimes it is saying, hey, it's a safety concern. We can't have them here because I'm trying to think of an example, but like they're touching the stove and it's hot. Like, there's safety concerns there with dementia that we want to ensure that we are also keeping that volunteer and individual safe. So being able to navigate that, it's a conversation. And again, it's having a conversation with someone who is able to understand. And so if that volunteer or individual is in a state where they are not going to remember or understand, then involving family members or getting additional help and support for them is going to be key. I can't tell you, I have made up stuff in the world of, hey, I still want this individual coming. I will have them dust. They'll take a rag and just go around and dust. Again, an activity or a volunteer opportunity to keep them feeling like they're still contributing, but at the same time, navigating safety. It is a very tough, but if you keep it in the outlet of compassion and care and realizing that again, an hour of time is a lot every month. Trust me, after about the third month, I'm like, what did I just do? Like, But at the end of the day, it was giving back because that individual is now part of our family. That individual is our community. And so again, that is part of our mission, is to help and support those individuals that helped and supported us. So figuring out a way to do that, or doing like a graduation. Hey, you volunteered and helped your community so much. We have nothing left for you. Like, we're going to do an entire awards ceremony, like make it big and grand. But doing something that's impactful for that individual. And again, it does come down to having a conversation of what can you do specifically for that volunteer, because they're so different. Every volunteer and every dementia, again, of where they're at is going to be different. So I'd recommend having that conversation with them, or if that's not going to work, with their family, and follow up of what can we do, because here's where our concerns are, and kind of collaborating together, coming together and figuring out solutions.
I think I have a question that definitely is going to be a whole other conversation, because it is directly related to volunteer management specifically, and how to process loss and grieving in your program, because that's something that I foresee coming up in my timeline, unfortunately, in the near future. And I would like to know the tools to navigate professionally while still maintaining, like you said, those personal relationships with people, because that's hard.
So navigating loss, number one is own the feelings, own the emotions. I'm going to get teary-eyed. Sitting down with the team and saying, hey, this is what happened. Providing as much information as possible, because there are team members out of the freaking woodwork, by the way, because I can't tell you, I didn't realize the relationship between two of the volunteers. And again, it was sitting down with the team of, hey, how can we remember this individual? And actually, Sage, I think a prime example with this group that actually helped all of us was the passing of Shirley. I mean, it's having that conversation of what can we do to remember that volunteer? I think every individual needs to be remembered in their own way. But I think it's having that brainstorming of bringing everyone together and notifying everyone of, hey, this is what happened. Having that moment to have conversation, to talk about stories, kind of have your own morning individual for your organization. And then from there, be able to, again, what can we do to continue to honor them? What can we continue to do to show respects to the family? Again, I've had a volunteer that moved far away and we stayed in contact, and they had passed away. And so, again, I couldn't be there for the funeral, but hey, I'm going to send flowers. I'm going to send a card. So being able to transition into that conversation and own the feelings of loss is hard. It isn't easy. And again, figuring out what are those next steps, because we have to make next steps. We have to make that transition into working or being able to function without that individual in our lives. So being able to kind of sit down and say, hey, here's the next thing that we need to do. Or even if it's a new position, I can't tell you, replacing someone who had passed away was so hard, because again, all I was thinking is, I was like, I need that individual in a like reincarnated person. Like, I just need this same individual. And being okay, again, you yourself, it starts with you of accepting those transitions and accepting those changes. And that's why, again, at home, I bawled my eyes out, because we had grown so close as a volunteer manager with my key player volunteer, like bawled my eyes out of, what does this next step look like? Like, where am I going to even go? Because this isn't just, and I think, I mean, in the nonprofit realm, all of us probably face this of, there's so much where your emotions are intertwined with the work that you're doing, because there's so much passion and so much emotion, and it's being okay with that. And then transitioning into, this is still a job. Like, I still have to be able to move forward. I can't stay at home and cry all day. I have to figure out what that next step is. And again, we had a void. We had to figure out how that void, and was it going to be fit correctly, directly for that volunteer? No. But again, I had to accept that that difficult transition was going to be hard and work through that first, and then be able to communicate that out to the team, out to the volunteers themselves.
Yeah, I think I'll echo the spending time, devoting some time together. We have loss often, not only of volunteers, but of guest families who stay with us. And so that comes up very regularly in both of those contexts. And one of the things that is really important is that if you are someone who is more affected than others, that you are able to step away, and that you do not need to be physically in our space if your emotions, which are fair and valid and need space, but if they are going to interfere with our ability to serve our guest families who have their own things to deal with, you have every right to step away. We still support you. We still, if it's just that you step into a back space where you're not visible and you collect yourself, and maybe you can draw in another teammate if you need to process verbally, right? That you can do that, but to do it outside of that, or if you need to actually go home, and that was not planned on, that you're allowed to do that. And the same policy is applicable for paid staff and unpaid staff. But making space for that is so important. Our culture is abysmal at grief. We're really terrible at it. And so it is, I think, one of the most important things we can do is to say, feel your feelings, and that's okay. And for if someone didn't know that volunteer as well, they're gonna be the person who steps up, so that the person who is affected can have the space they need. And when you're open about it, it allows that coverage for one another. It allows space for us to feel what we really need to feel, and we model that for the other people. So yeah, it's really hard. I just an offer, if any of you ever want to talk more about grief, that is something that I feel strongly about, and I feel like equipping one another for that, and talking about it is really important. So my door is always open if you ever want to talk more about that. So okay, Nate, thank you so much. I know we're short on time, and we want to make sure that Casey has time for his stuff. I'm pretty sure I can say, and we didn't offer this for Sage, but I think for both of you, that I'm sure if someone has additional questions after they watch this recording or after this time is over, that they can reach out to you just as much as Sage. Sage should put her information there. So Casey, I'm going to let you take over.
All right, I'm going to end on a bummer note. We're talking about all these beautiful volunteer stories, and now I'd love to share a couple of thoughts about risk management. And again, this is like one of those things that is just part of the territory. As a team member for the service learning team at Boise State, we have the fortune of having a risk management office. We have the resources from the state to host a risk management office. So a lot of this stuff falls outside of my desk, but having been a part of a lot of nonprofit organizations and working with a lot of nonprofit organizations, without that resource, I've seen a lot of ways that people try to be as safe as possible. And really, risk management, it's a process. It's not like it's not an end goal. It's a process that you always have to be aware of, and you always have to be kind of hitting the mark, because it's about keeping people safe. And that's the ultimate goal. I mean, of course, there's the other side of things where nobody wants to get sued. Nobody wants to put the organization at risk for those types of things. But if you keep people safe, if you keep people well, then you won't have to worry about any of that stuff. So just to start out with some of the basics, of course, like you have to have the volunteer waiver. And if you're hosting volunteers, you likely already have that. If you don't do it, that's one of the basic things. But I would encourage you to think about how you do it. These are like decisions, the basic decisions that your organization has to make. And as the volunteer coordinator, volunteer manager, a lot of this stuff is probably going to fall on your desk to a certain degree. So you can try to influence the situation by making decisions on how this stuff is managed, how this stuff is communicated. Like, how is the volunteer waiver presented, communicated, collected, and what does that look like? If you're I've been a part of organizations where volunteers sign a volunteer waiver at every volunteer shift. There's other organizations where it's annual, other organizations where it's one and done. But those are decisions that you're going to have to make. And I know there's legalese involved, but find a way to communicate that effectively, because it is ultimately about keeping people safe. So how can you communicate that while also, providing some protection for the organization? As far as a volunteer application or volunteer selection, that's an important thing to think about too. A lot of volunteer managers, a lot of organizations are of the mindset that like any volunteer is helpful, but it's got to be a good fit. If it's not a good fit, if it's a volunteer with a different skill set than the volunteer task, or stuff like that, like if it's just generally not a good fit, then that increases the likelihood that accidents might happen, or something might not go as expected. So that's where the risk increases a little bit. So I encourage you to like have an application, be selective about what volunteers you're having help you, and where they're placed or what they're doing. Do what you can to screen for volunteers to make sure that not only they're in a good situation, but that it's a net positive for your organization as well. That will reduce the risk if you make the right matches with between organization, or between the volunteer and the task that the volunteer is doing. Another basic is confidentiality. A lot of organizations serve a lot of different types of people or causes, and we want volunteers to be sharing what they're doing, sharing what your organization is doing. So think about like, what are things that you have to protect? What is information that you have to protect, and kind of focus on that, so that it's not just a blanket statement. There's a lot of confidentiality agreements that are like, that make it seem like you're a top secret agent or something like that. But clarify that, make that clear with volunteers of what can you share and what do we need to protect, what information do we need to protect, and why. Providing that context is really important, I think. Moving on to the design of designing, this is where, an ounce of prevention is worth, I don't know what the saying is, but this is prevention. Is your volunteer description clear as to what the volunteer is doing? This is where volunteers can kind of like self-select in or out. Is if you're clear about what the role is, what some of the expectations are, and what the needs of the role are, then some volunteers might see that, read that, and decide like, that's just not for me. So instead of cramming together any volunteer and any task, again, this is another example of finding a good fit, because if you've got an elderly volunteer who's expected to lift 50 pounds over and over again, that is not going to be a good fit in the long term and might increase the risk of an injury or an accident. Same thing with orientation and training. I would invest in orientation and training. And again, a lot of people do that a lot of different ways. Orientation and training day of, maybe a standalone orientation and training during the like bringing the volunteer on. But that's where you can communicate, you can effectively communicate, like, again, what are the expectations? What are you going to be facing as a volunteer, and why? I think that's one thing that a lot of people kind of breeze through is, why are we doing this? Why is this important? Why is it important that you not do this? If volunteers have a more context and a better understanding of the whys and the why nots, then they're more likely to kind of adhere to those expectations. When it comes to action or execution, I think thinking about what does the staff support look like. Volunteer managers, there are a lot of volunteer managers who also supervise the work, but a lot of times other coworkers are involved. What do they know about the volunteers? What do they know about the volunteer descriptions? Are the expectations clear to them? Is it within the bandwidth of that staff or coworker? Because when stuff starts getting tight, that's when corners start being cut, and that's just a natural thing. And a lot of corners that are cut can lead to higher risk scenarios. So having a good idea and good training for anybody who's going to be coming in contact with volunteers should kind of have a basic understanding of why that volunteer is there and what they're doing and how to support them. Supervision, regular check-ins, that's also a great resource for kind of monitoring how things are going, if there are risks that you're not seeing, that you didn't account for. That can be a time to kind of collect that information. Are volunteers following expectations? You can get, are they receiving enough support to do the task? So supervision and check-ins, regular check-ins, you got to create that relationship where volunteers are comfortable sharing that information, sharing that vulnerability of, actually, I don't feel safe in this scenario. You got to be able to build that trust to be able to get eyes on the situation in a different way. And always, I think, again, one of those tasks, one of those things that is cut when the bandwidth isn't there is like reviewing, is this volunteer description accurate? Is the execution effective? So consult volunteers. What do you think about this volunteer description? Does it match what you were doing? Getting that perspective from the volunteer of what is missing in training, what is missing in orientation, what would you have liked to have known to prepare for this? Having that perspective is super valuable. And the same thing with staff, like other staff coworkers, they have a different perspective than you as a volunteer coordinator. They have a different perspective of what the theory looks like in action. The theory of, we want volunteers to do task A or task B, but what does that look like in action? Is that actually reasonable? What are the barriers that we're not seeing? And I think, again, most importantly is consulting peers, like in groups like this, consulting other volunteer managers, like what are you seeing? What do you do? How do you process? How do you reduce risk in this way? How do you review volunteer work at your organization? I'm sure everybody is willing to share their best practices, and that's how we all get better, is in the aggregate, as a group, sharing what works and what doesn't work. I'm sure you'll meet lots of folks who are very willing to share how they do things and learn from you too. I mean, that's part of the part of the exchange. And organizationally, this is part of the process of developing that volunteer policy. What does that look like? A lot of organizations just slap a volunteer policy on top of the worker policy and call it good, but they're inherently different types of roles at the organization. So as you kind of get settled in, as your volunteer program gets settled in, as you learn more, as you see more, it's important to have a specific volunteer policies and procedures that is documented, that everybody can reference, and that even volunteers that can reference. So the expectations across the board are clear. If there is an incident, that's going to require incident response. And does everybody know what that means? Again, that's one of those things that is like, we have general incident response. This is what that looks like. But with volunteers in play, they've got different needs. They've got different needs. They've got different. There's could be a different approach. So as using volunteers becomes more familiar and you gain experience, like look at those incident response procedures and see if and what can be tweaked to better support volunteers, to better meet volunteer needs. And this is again a process, a cycle of starting back over again at the basics. I love when there is an annual review of all of this stuff. So what have you learned this year, and how can that impact, how can that contribute to what the volunteer waiver, what the basics look like? What does a volunteer waiver look like? What does the application selection process look like? What does confidentiality look like? And start over with this new knowledge that you have in building a culture of safety. And it's the lamest tagline that risk management is everybody's job, but it's true. It's true that if you want a safe organization, if you want a safe place for volunteers to be, if you want a safe place for your for whatever your mission is, if you want it to happen safely, then it has to be everybody contributing to that. That's what I got. Keep it simple. One slide.
Thank you. I love it. And I honestly, I found myself thinking just there as you were saying, it's everybody's job. That it's foundational for the other things we talked about today, really, because when we have done all the things that you've described, we've gone through this process to assess our program and the safety of it. Not that we rest, right? There's always something new that can come up that we need to assess the risk of that. But it does free us in a lot of ways so that our primary focus can then be the volunteer in front of us, because we know we have given thought, we've given communication, we've given so much to their safety, that then we can focus on their individual person in front of us. So I really love how all three of these presentations, though I don't think that we considered that as we were designing today, they've really gone so well together. I think it's just cohesive. So thank you for that. Is there anything, my question for you, Casey, is there anything that, as you consider the volunteer programs that you've worked with or that you have seen, that you're like, this is either a non-negotiable, everybody should have it, or this is a thing that is often overlooked, even in the most well-established program? What are some things that we might think about on both ends of that spectrum?
I think often kind of skipped over is the description of like describing what the actual job is. I think a lot of that is like we'll get the basics down and then we'll cover that in on the job training. But I think it's important for people, especially people who learn in different ways, to have that very clear in front of, as clear as possible, so that can be referenced, and so that there are as clear of expectations and as clear of expectations as possible. And yes, it does take more investment to try to do that, and it is kind of tedious work. But I think if you invest more in clarifying what the work actually is, I think that is good in the long run, and especially when it comes to volunteer satisfaction and safety. I know a lot of volunteers kind of see this vague volunteer description and then get into it, and it's not what they expected, and it doesn't work out. They either don't want to do it, or something, it just doesn't work out. Something happens, or they're disappointed, or they're not necessarily qualified to do the job that they thought it was. So that becomes a bad experience for everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think about that a lot in our context, because we have jobs that like help around the house. It's very easy. You take 2 hours, you sanitize stuff. It's not challenging. But even on our website, before you go to sign up, we have a blurb, right? It's not a formal job description, but it is a job description, right? Because we want people to understand what they're agreeing to. And I think you're right. That is when I think about experiences that I've had as a volunteer, how often there was no understanding of what I was going to do. All I had to go off of was the title. And I was like, sign up for this, and this is the time. And then you show up and you're like, oh yeah, I had no idea. I still did it, and it was fine, but I had no idea. So yeah.
So yeah, the kind of the investment that you put into clarifying what the job actually is, what the task is. If you don't do that, then it just falls on whoever is supervising the volunteer on site. Then it becomes a training requirement for them. And then is that something within their bandwidth? Are they prepared to train that person? What does training that person even look like? So it just complicates things. I think keeping things as simple as possible, simple and straightforward as possible, is the best practice. And I think especially with people being people being stretched thin, especially volunteer coordinators having 27 other duties as assigned, keeping things as simple as possible is a tangible path forward, sustainable path forward, and it's effective when it comes to like communicating and using volunteers. So I mean, it does take some investment, but keeping things as simple as possible is probably is better than the alternative.
I feel like I want to have you come and speak to the people who are involved in event planning at our place and everywhere, because I think of the people who do events, right? They're thinking about all of these other logistics, and they forget, oh yeah, I want volunteers at that event, but they're gonna need they're just like, oh yeah, have them report to me, and I'll just tell them what to do. But as you just said, like on that kind of a day, you already have so many other things going. So Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna either steal that or I'm gonna be like, Casey, I need you to come talk to my people. Because maybe they'll listen to you.
Right.
No, I really appreciate that, Casey. Does anybody else have a question for Casey or thoughts that you've got to share?
I just want to real quick, number one, Casey, phenomenal, because I think this is a key item that people forget. Because even like when people they'll send me like a sentence of what they want for a volunteer, and then I'll send back and say, no, I need all this information. And they're like, I don't want to fill out all this information. I'm like, then you don't want to volunteer.
Yeah.
I have never actually stated it's to help alleviate risk, but you pointing that out was very key. And I'm going to start doing that. I also wrote a note that I'm going to hand over to one of my volunteers who's behind my computer screen here. But it says review risks with volunteers, because we talk about it as a company and as staff, but I've never actually gone to the volunteers and said, hey, what risks are you facing or what risks are you identifying? Again, we usually do that on a staff level or as a company-wide level. But I think going to the source, I mean, volunteers are going to know, hey, this was a risky situation, or hey, I didn't feel comfortable doing this because of XYZ. So I think surveying volunteers specifically for risks will help that. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's definitely an actionable item that I'm taking, because I've never done that. And I think it's beneficial.
I want to give Casey flowers. I don't know if it's his project or somebody else's in the service learning department, but I don't know if it was new, but this year I got like this is what your orientation should include for your student service people, like boop, 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 boop. like so cut and dry of like the expectations from an organization to the service learning students. Because like obviously I know how to do my job, but like it's a little bit different conversation with the service learning kids, because we want to make sure they're really learning and they're doing the student thing that they're supposed to be doing with the service. And so having that document provided and just outlining, like, if you have literally any questions, this is what your expectations are from an organization. This is who you should reach out to with your questions, or how you should handle these scenarios. If you have any questions, and we got a very far in advance as well. So I want to give you the flowers you deserve and your program deserves, because that was so helpful. I think with assessing, with our current project being so risk focused, like it's literally cyber security assessment of the problems we're having as an organization right now. And so that is so risk focused and already very risk heavy. And so the cut and dry expectations was very, very helpful. So I'm taking a note from that document and using it as a resource going forward.
Good.
Anything else? We're down to our last minute, believe it or not. But I had every confidence we were going to use every minute of our time, so I'm glad that we didn't delay too long. And I just want to thank all of you for being here and for the insight that you bring to our community. I'm excited to share this recording for the people who couldn't be with us today, because I think there's so much that's valuable. And Nate, I think you highlighted it the most overtly, but I think each of you communicated how much we care about the volunteers that we're interacting with, and that's at the heart of what we want to do. And we want to engage them. We want to give them the best meaningful work that we can. We want them to know that their time and energy matter. And each of the things that you brought to us today help us to improve that experience for our volunteers. So I really am grateful for each of you for preparing for this day and making sure that our membership get to gain from your knowledge base. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate you all. And more